Happy New Year to Crossview. Merry Christmas as well. And thank you for welcoming me again. I always get concerned when I preach in a church and they never invite you back. You wonder why, but anyway, thank you. And so we're ready for 2025. It just goes on and on. So we'll see if we get the PowerPoint on here. I don't know how this all works. Yeah, there we go. So we are Arley and Janice Loewen. You know Chris Loewen. We do the relative thing. He is my nephew. And the Dirksons over here, they are also my cousins. You can ask later on how they're all my cousins, and there's probably a lot more. Yeah, Orville is my cousin. Well, his dad is my cousin, so I'm very closely rooted to you guys. So you should invite me. Anyway, our world has been Afghanistan for over 40 years. We are from Bloemenort. I grew up here locally. My wife is from the States. But we have done almost everything Afghanistan for over 40 years. And it's been an amazing world. But we'll leave Afghanistan and we'll focus on Canada this year, or this morning. And one of the issues, the political issues in Canada, in the United States, in the Western world, what do we do with migrants? It's part of politics, isn't it? And our Canadian government has had to take back their ambitious goal of bringing in, they said at one time, 500,000 newcomers every year. In fact, the immigration minister has just been tasked to turn down the tap, and they feel they've overdone it. 400,000 newcomers still arriving every year in Canada. 25% of Canadians are not born in Canada. Now let's try that here. How many of you were not born in Canada? Okay, that will not be 25%. That could perhaps be 10%. When we talk about newcomers, we talk about the economic workers class. About 60% of newcomers come here to work. They get work visas. And then we have refugees. About 15% are refugees. And then another 15% would be family reunification. But one of the political questions is, can we sustain this flood of new arrivals? And when I talk about newcomers, these would all be those that come with visas. How do you feel about it? Does it get you excited? Does it get you nervous when you go to Hortons, and now 90% are obviously not people who grew up in Steinbach, or when you go shopping in Walmart? Are you afraid? Are you maybe indifferent? Maybe it makes no difference. We have the challenge of secularism around us. And now we have the challenge of newcomers and new religions. What should we as followers of Jesus, how should we respond to this? Well, we have our political views, and maybe connected to that is our economical views, but how do we relate to newcomers? And I want to share this morning our relationship to newcomers with the metaphor of two rooms. And on one side, we have our homeroom. And when I talk about homeroom, I mean that's us, our friends. That would be Crossview. You could consider Crossview as your home room. It's safe here and normal. You know how to say hello, and how will that other person say hello to you. It's just how we do things. And then on the other hand, you have the outsiders, the other room. So just for the sake of illustration, let's say that this group are the outsiders, the others. And we don't know them. They're strangers. They talk differently. And since we don't know them and they're strangers, we get estranged from them. And if we're estranged from them, then we become suspicious. What are they really like? And the more suspicious we become, we can even think that they're dangerous. And the problem is, we never actually get into that room. And those in that room, they don't come to our room. Now, I want to just back up and say, in one sense, we are all newcomers to Canada. Those of us that celebrated the 150th anniversary of the first arrivals to the Hanover area, 150 years is relatively new. And even though, except for the First Nations, and we could say First Nations probably, they arrived at a certain time as well. But now, for the sake of the story, the people in the homeroom, those are who we are comfortable with. And birds of the feather flock together. It's just a natural phenomenon. It's nothing just to do with Mennonites that like to be together. It's just the way of the world. That's what tribes do. You stay together. And that's how they are able to maintain their solidarity and their unity, by sticking together. But we still are worried about the others, because generally a human being fears differences. And the less we have in common with a person, the more likely we are to see their weaknesses instead of their strengths. When someone is different, it creates uncertainty, and uncertainty produces anxiety. So what about those in the other room? How are they like? You know, we may research them, critique them. You know, I've been a specialist in critiquing the Muslim world and studying the culture and the attitudes of Muslims. And we might condemn them. On the other hand, there's some who romanticize that other world. They're so wonderful. And we look down on ourselves and think how bad we are. And there's that negative romanticizing of the other side as well, which is rather naive. But whatever, we wonder about those in the other room. Well, before we move back into looking at the room, I want to just do a little glance at Scripture and how in the first century people related to outsiders. So, back to here, I missed this quote back here. No matter how much we fight those people, no matter how much we shout at them or condemn them, unless we offer an alternative to those in the other room, the show goes on. And that's separate from the politics and the economics. It's especially true of us as followers of Jesus. But let's go back to the first century. In the first century, when the people of God, especially the leaders, they struggled with the outside world. They were living under Roman oppression and the nations in general, and they were wondering, where and how is this kingdom of God that we read about in the Old Testament, where is that going to be? Where can we find that room? And when we live in that room, that hope of Israel, when God will come and judge the other rooms and set up our own homeroom, restore Israel back to its greatness, and how should we do our relationship with the outsiders while we wait for the kingdom of God to come? Well, there were different responses, and I'm sure you're familiar with these different responses that first century Jews had about that other room, which at that time was an oppressive room upon themselves. So we had the Pharisees who said, get back to the book, and then we will be able to build our own room. The Zealots said, that's far too slow. We got to have an armed resistance and set up a revolution. The Essenes, we don't read much about the Essenes in scriptures, but they were the separatists that went back into the desert. They're called the desert community people, and they said, we are the children of light, and the rest are the children of darkness. And we can't do anything about the children of darkness. They're finished. We're just going to be light here in our own little desert place. And could well be that John the Baptist, this desert preacher, may have been from the Essenes. And then the Sadducees and the scribes, they want to keep the status quo, not rock the boat. We'll stay here and you stay there, and let's not hurt each other too much. And of course the masses, they just survive and long for that freedom that would somehow, somewhere come. And then Jesus comes along and says, the kingdom of God is here. We know that story so well. And he calls people to follow him and to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And then what is that world? What room is that? Well, that would be, you are to be the light and the salt for that other room, whether it's the Roman world or it's your own Jewish world. And throughout the Gospels, Jesus is calling people to build this new room, this new Israel. This is the kingdom of God. And he comes to the end of his time here on earth. He is with his small group of followers, and he gives them an amazing talk of what it will be like when he will leave them. And he gives them this commission, this calling. This is how you are to live when I am gone. I'll be with you, but I'll be with you in a different way. And Jesus prays, and in that prayer, it's embedded in a commission, a calling of what you're supposed to be like. I have given them your word, and the world, that's the other room, has hated them, for they are not of the world any more than I am of the world. My prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of it. Sanctify or separate them by the truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. There's a lot of key words here in this prayer. I've underlined or highlighted them. The word, world, sanctify, sent. And these words, they work together. Jesus has given his followers the word. And what's the word? Well, the word's from God, and Jesus is that word from God. He has given himself to his disciples. And this word, this Jesus, has cleansed them, made them pure. It sanctifies or separates them and puts them into that separate room. But what's that room like? But it's like there's the world, that other room is still very much there. It's around them. And you can't ignore the other room. And we see several relations to this world. We have the word, hate. You're not of that room, but you're not out of that room either. You're in it, or you're going to be sent into it. And if we change the metaphor a little bit, this is what it could look like. Now, I used the same colors, and the colors just for the sake of difference here. But we are in the world. We are scattered among others. And what are we supposed to be like in that world? In the world. Whatever the world is like, as followers of Jesus, what are we supposed to be like? Well, there was two truths that we read there. One is that we're supposed to be separate from that world. We're sanctified. Sanctified means to be set apart. But at the same time, we're supposed to be sent into that world. And this is the challenge. If we don't separate, we become just like the world. And what's that all about? That's meaningless. But if we only separate, we become irrelevant to the world. So which one is it? And it's very hard to be sent into the world if we remain separated from the world. And it's very hard to remain separated from the world when you're sent into the world. What is the solution? What's the answer? And this is probably one of the struggles that Christianity has fought with throughout its 2,000-year history. Our relationship to the world. Well, we are supposed to do both. We are supposed to be separate, and we're supposed to be sent in. So we must cultivate our separateness. We know Paul tells the believers in Corinth, come out from them and be separate from that world. They were called Christians, and it was actually the outsiders that called the followers of Jesus, that called them Christians. I wonder what they're calling us now, the outsiders. Paul, the Apostle Paul, called followers of Jesus the in Christ ones and Christ in you ones. And if we go to Ephesians 1, where he's writing to another small group of believers who are inside a large group of outsiders, and the church, that let's call it that blue body, is Christ's body. It is made full and complete by Christ, who fills all things everywhere with himself. The Message says, by which he fills everything with his presence. I wonder, how are we going to fill this world with Jesus? How's that going to get filled? Well, now I've got the screen figured. There we go. Okay. Jesus is going to fill the world with himself through the followers of Jesus. That's how the glory of God will cover the earth, through his church. Now, I have a picture here of carrots and carrot juice. What's that all about? Oh, about 45 years back, I was in my 20s, my mother had cancer. And in those days, I don't know if they still have that, but the story was that if you ate a lot of carrots, it would fight cancer. So she bought this carrot juicer back in, 45 years ago. I guess they had them back then already. And I remember back home, we had a mountain of carrots on the table, and she juiced those things, and she drank carrot juice, and what happened to her? Sorry? She turned carrot-like. The white of her eyes turned yellow and all. And she actually did get better, lived for many years till 2011. The more she ate carrots and carrot juice, the more she became like a carrot. And the more we imbibe Jesus, we become like Jesus. And our separateness, that which separates us from that other world, is not a geographical separateness. It's not being from Steinbach. It's not being a Mennonite or whatever back. Our separateness is Jesus. Jesus is that which separates us. And that's why we come together Sunday mornings and all those other times to what? To drink more of Jesus. To become more like Jesus with each other. But at the same time, we're also to cultivate our sentness. We are called to sent out, to be sent out. That's Jesus' words, your light and your salt. And this is our calling, to go into those other rooms, whether they're Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, or just backslidden Christians, secular, whatever. But our focus today is on that other room, will be those that are not like us. Victor Donovan, a missionary to the Maasai people of Tanzania, the 20th century, writes this: an inward turned Christianity is a dangerous counterfeit. It is no Christianity at all. Christianity must be a force that moves outward, and a Christian community is basically an existence for others. Would you agree with that? That is the whole meaning of being a Christian community. A church that turns in on itself will surely die. If we just shine in ourselves, if we're just salty to ourselves, we get too salty. We get stagnant, and we even become not very nice, and we stink probably if we're just by ourselves. So, let's go back to the metaphor room. What is that other room like? And what can we do to enter that other room and open our doors so that those from the other room can enter our room? You know, maybe we're a bit afraid of the other room. And probably they're a little bit afraid of us. And how can we better connect with those from the other room? Well, I'm going to get a little bit practical. And this is going to be more like a seminar rather than a regular Sunday morning preach now from the next part of our sermon. And we're just going to do some practical, anthropological, sociological stuff. First of all, regardless what room we're from, we're all the same. The homeroom or the other room, we're all, because we're created in the image of God, we're good people. We all eat, we all sleep, we all, most of us get married, we have children, and on and on and on. We're in the image of God. We're all the same. And also we're all pretty bad. We are sinners. And we need Jesus. So, basic to everyone in planet Earth, regardless of which room we're from, we are the same. But at the same time, we are not the same. Let's be honest about it. We are different from each other. And I'm going to use the phrase, the West and the rest, which is the title of a book written by some famous sociologist. What we call the global North and the global South. And by what I mean is, when we look at this map here, 75%, almost 75% of newcomers to Canada come from what we call the global South. That is from Middle East, Asia, and Latin America and Africa. Now, with the recent arrival of more Ukrainians to Canada, that statistic has probably changed somewhat. But that's the reality, that the newcomers, most newcomers to Canada, are somewhat culturally different than we are. And how are we going to relate to those newcomers? Now, before I generalize too much, okay, then that's the right one. We want to just generalize the difference between the global North that most of us are from the global South. Now, Sarah Lanier, she was with Loewen for many years, has written a very easy-to-read book about differences and familiarities between cultures called Foreign to Familiar, and she highlights what's called the global North as those from cold cultures and the global South as those from hot cultures. And the issue here is not so much temperature and climate, though you could make an issue about that as well. A hot climate culture refers to those people that are more relational and community-oriented. And people from cold cultures doesn't just mean from Manitoba and the cold weather, cold winters, but they are people who love structure and order, and even though they think they're sociable and social, they have none of that sociality or community as the hot cultures. If you look at those two very general differences, how would you summarize people from the cold cultures? How would you summarize people from hot cultures? And this is very generally speaking. We had a seminar, we'd have a discussion on this, but very generally speaking, the cold culture people, that's most of us here from Western Canada, we are individualists. We believe on ourselves. And people from Global South would be much more communal, group-oriented people. Let me just give you an example. Are you going to let your mom and dad choose who you're going to marry? No way. You're going to do it yourself, right? You're going to choose your own job, or tell your dad what job you're going to have, and so forth and so on. We decide for ourselves what we're going to do. We live by ourselves. I don't know how many of you have maybe a 3-bedroom house and you're living there with just 2 people. Can you imagine? 3 bedrooms and 2 people in a 3-bedroom house. That is individualism to the T. Now, on the other hand, we have millions of people in the warm cultures. They pack each room with a family. I remember in Pakistan, we rented a house, a 4-bedroom house. Every single bedroom has their own ensuite. It's not because it's luxury, because in every single bedroom you have a family. So you obviously have to have a wash. We had in that house, we had 4 washrooms. I think 5 because there was a small one. They're not luxury washrooms, by the way, but it's a lot of work cleaning them. Why? Because you live together. Brothers and sisters with their children live in one place together. Now, people and individual, they pride themselves of being creative. We do our own thing. I do what I want to do, and my mom and dad are not going to tell. You follow your own heart. Don't let anybody else say what you can do. You follow yourself. Isn't that what Hollywood is? The mantra of Hollywood. But here on the other side, they continue what's gone. Tradition is actually a beautiful thing. It creates stability. You know what you're supposed to do, what kind of job you're supposed to have, because you continue the past. Now, this is huge generalization because even those people in the global south, they're not all the same either. And we got to be careful. We don't lump them up all the same just because their English is a little bit different or they have different color of skin. You look at these 2 people. Now, what's the same? Well, first of all, they got beards, 2 men, beards, and turbans. So what's the difference? Can someone tell me the difference of these 2 men with both the turbans? Religion. Very good. So what's this man's religion? Sikh, and this one? So we have a Punjabi Sikh here and a devout Arab Muslim. Very different. You can just tell it by the different type of turban. So maybe we don't specialize in turbanology and so forth, but what this helps us is to realize we don't lump all turban people, they're all Muslim. Majority of Punjabi truck drivers are not Muslim truck drivers. They're Punjabi, Sikh, and by the way, not all Sikhs. I don't know, anybody here from Sikh background? Many, many Sikhs don't wear turbans anymore. So all that to say that we don't lump them all up into the same group. For example, you have an Iraqi Muslim as your neighbor. And they're devout Muslims. This lady knows a little bit English. It's hard. You'd like to share. Oh, and over there's an Iranian. Oh, let's bring the Iranian lady over to share with the Iraqi Muslim. Does that work? They speak totally different languages. Okay, maybe they would eat somewhat similar foods, but their language is very different. So, or you have a Syrian Orthodox taxi driver who's from an Orthodox background, and they have a Syrian Shiite, and on and on. So, now we don't need to all specialize on the differences, the many different cultures of the global south, but we're going to go back to generalizing, and this is from my experience. What can we do to enter the other room? And how can we help others enter our room? And so we're going to get very practical here. Chris, I hope it's okay to talk about practical things like food and stuff. It's very practical. What are some things we can do? So the first thing we can do to enter the other room in a practical way is just simply through food. And why food? Well, first of all, I talked before about we are afraid of the stranger, and the word for fearing the stranger is xenophobia. Generally, human beings are xenophobic. That's because we like to be with our own people. Now, how do we overcome xenophobia? Well, the way to overcome it is by philoxenos. Philo is phileo, Philadelphia. Philo is one of the Greek words for love, is to love the xenos, the stranger. And that word philoxenos in the New Testament, when it's translated into English, is translated as hospitality. So the way to overcome xenophobia of those people over there is by philoxenosing them into our homes. And did you notice, out of these 8 people who shared their stories, 2 of them talked about having people over for meals. Did you get that? It hit me right away. I noted it down. They were into philoxenos. Well, maybe not just loving the stranger. You actually got to start loving your friends, and then you can maybe start loving the stranger. And the tradition of hospitality is from ancient civilization. What do you do with the stranger? Will you be hostile because you don't know what that stranger could do. He could kill you. Or will you be hospitable? And so one of the ways to welcome, a stranger comes across with a camel, what are you going to do with that guy? Is he violent or not? Bring him into your tent. Once he's into your tent, he's not going to be violent to you. So that's one way. We have a much bigger reason to be hospitable than that. So the hospitality was seen as that which made a civilization truly a noble civilization. How do you treat the stranger? Thousands of years later, how do we treat the newcomer? And so we have guests and hosts. Now, those of you that still know Low German, what's guest in German? Jas, has, host. It's actually the same word, guest and host. Because when they come together, they honor each other and they become one as they share bread. This is what Jesus did when we were guests at his table. And so food, eating together, is part of the picture in the Old Testament and in the New as well of that future eschatological fulfillment of all things when we will eat together with the Messiah. That was the Jewish hope. And that would be an awesome meal. Now we have so much good food nowadays, especially coming out of Christmas. We forget that eschatological hope. But in those days, they didn't have that much. And they were longing for it, having all the meats and the wines and the oils and so forth. And the big issue, the big question, was not what are you going to have for Christmas? What are you going to eat? But who is going to be there? And where are you going to sit? Those were the big issues. Nowadays, you have round tables. So with the round table, it's not so much the head and the end of the table, but everyone is sort of connected to the middle. And that was a big controversial issue with Jesus because he ate with outsiders as well as with insiders. And that's the beautiful thing of Jesus. He's not just hanging out over there. He's hanging out with the insiders as well. And when you enter a home, or someone enters your home, you have honored each other. So food is a way to do it. Now here it's super, super practical. This is from our experience. 8 ways that you can make food a practical thing with newcomers, especially the global south, especially for us, the Middle East and Central Asia. So when it comes to tea, don't even ask, do you want a cup of tea? Because they're going to say no. Just give them tea if they're in your house. It's just an automatic thing you do. And with some cookies and nuts and raisins that you hopefully have there with the tea. If you want to do it for a meal, 2 of you guys said you'd like to have people over for meals. Have a lot of basmati rice, and not the Chinese sticky rice, but basmati rice. That's our experience. Of course, Chinese rice for other people. Meats and sauces, several kinds. And we got all kinds of cookers now. We have a special cooker for every kind of meat, don't we? So you can make all kinds of meats and forget hot dogs. My grandson yesterday, we had our Christmas thing as a family, and he was upset that we had chicken and ribs. He wanted his hot dogs. That was his favorite. But for the newcomers, from my experience, forget the hot dogs. I mean, after they've been here a couple of years, maybe some of them are into that. Pastas work well. If you're not into basmati rice, you can do pasta. But forget sandwich foods. That comes 2-3 years later once they're more acclimatized to sandwich people like we are. Simple salads, lots of greens, lots of lemons, and desserts. Fruit and puddings, but forget the fancy cakes, cheesecakes and pies and stuff. That doesn't work from our experience with the newcomers from the Middle East. And if you want to do a picnic, instead of having them in your nice fancy homes, go out for picnics, and of course in summertime, lots of hot dishes, kebabs, rice, and it's big meals. You bring them with all the pots, you wrap a lot of towels around the pots and so forth. When you are invited, bring a small gift. Because there's always reciprocity. Make it small. Janice my wife is just very specialized at that. She'll bring a bag of candies, and when the kids are, she'll just hand out the candies for the kids. Restaurants, yeah, we can do restaurants. It's awkward because you don't know, will you bring the whole family? And so forth, and of course the expense, and then who pays? Some of the newcomers think because they have been welcome, maybe they should pay, and so forth. And then, of course, the eating restrictions for Muslims with halal foods. Just some very practical things from our experience with Middle Easterners. Number 2, how do we engage the newcomers? Engage them through the family. Newcomers, from my experience, are genuinely traditional people coming from traditional cultures, and they have a high view of the family. And that resonates with followers of Jesus. For them, generally, the global South, it's a patriarchal world, respect for the elders. Their security rests in the family, their pension, their support, the ongoing generations, the importance of marriage and gender clarity and so forth. So much we could talk about what is important for the family in the traditional global South. So, whatever family you come from, we can, I believe, we should be not so much focused on family, but mission-based, that our family is a mission to reach families. And so when you see a newcomer, how are you going to talk with them? Ask them about family, because they have that eye view of family. Ask about their parents, about their uncles, about their relatives, and on and on. And you talk about your family. Show pictures of the family. And if you're talking with children and newcomers and teenagers, include their parents. Include newcomers in your family. Oh, we could just tell stories of how we've, our world has been the Afghans and the Iranians. We'd have them over into our home, and one guy, I remember, this is the first time of 7 years in Canada that I've had Thanksgiving. I always wanted to know what Thanksgiving was all about. And he was just the happiest guy that day when he experienced family life inside a Canadian family. Watch gender issues. Okay, for a model of family ideal. So I believe family, as we have the stability and the peace of family. I know we have a lot of issues, dysfunction, and that's getting out with our individualism. It's becoming a crisis in our world. But we can model the family ideal. They have the high view of the family. It's hugely dysfunctional, even though they have a high view of it. In Jesus, I believe we can model the family ideal, show it off to them. Watch the gender issues, how you greet, how you touch, how you smile. That is for another seminar to talk about that, because that can be very misleading if you smile wrongly and hug too aggressively. Join the East as they honor their elders. I'm getting to preach in Blumenau a month from now on honor your father and mother. I love that. That's going to be a good one. It's about how my grandkids should honor me, but that is something we have forgotten. Honoring the elderly, giving them the first place, and all that. Well, we could go on. Football, futsal. Most of the people, if you have a futsal game back there, I think most of them will be Arabs and Latinos and African. That's how you reach a large group of Steinbachers who have just come to Hanover. It's the most universal sport and doesn't take much. Oh, here's another one. I made it phonics. Those of you who are grammar teachers, we engage with newcomers by speech. Now, we as individualists, we are primarily direct cultures, and we tend to focus on the central issue. We get to the fact. Let's shoot it straight. Don't beat around the bush. Tell it like it is, and on and on. And so you say what you're thinking. You say what's on your mind. Now, generally, global South, honor, shame people. They think more of the context around them. They will speak here and there and so forth. Which one do you think is more Christ-like? To focus on the outer issue or to go right to the core? Well, you can argue back and forth, because you also need to be careful about the environment that's around. But the problem with the indirect, you got to really read between the lines sometimes. And so how do we talk? And this has been a lifetime of learning for me. How do I talk with someone whose world is so different? To learn the art of courtesy, the art of saying, hey, how are you? How are you? That is so dull. Hi, how are you? Learn how to do many greetings. The Persians say, first salam, then kalam. First the greeting and then the work. So give it some time before you get to the issue. So you focus on how you say something and on what you say. Learn how to answer invites. How do you negotiate an invitation? Someone invites you to your house. To their house, will you go? Well, you got to negotiate it. Maybe yes, no, and then after a while. You invite someone, they say no. It doesn't mean they mean no. No doesn't mean no. And that's maybe why Jesus said, let your yes be yes and no be no. But so when they say no, compel them to come in, Jesus says. Because they wouldn't believe. Why would you invite them? So urge them. We can become too naive on being just open and sharing our personal lives with someone who talks on the outside. So we learn to tell stories and talk about other issues when we want to get to the point and so forth. What did Nathan do when he spoke to King David? He just told a story. And boom, it went to the heart. The play is the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king, and so forth. So talk suggestions, so much. And then, last of all, we engage with newcomers through faith, through speaking. And this is my experience is more from the Muslim world, but by and large, Global South people are God-conscious people. Now, I was just talking to a guy here. He's here in this building. I got to know him this morning, and he said, I love Steinbach because it's a God or it's a spiritual town. Are we embarrassed that Steinbach has a Christian history? Or are we proud about it? Do we wear our faith on our sleeves? By and large, the people from the Global South, they wear their faith on their sleeves. They are not ashamed to be Catholic, to be a Muslim or Hindu or Sikh, whatever. They show it off. And Steinbach used to be known as the automobile city. Maybe we should be known for another city. We should be proud about it, about who we are, what our heritage is. Show it off. And it's not just something of our cultural past. It's something that we love. We are people of faith. We are God-conscious, and therefore we are God-talking people. Now, this last part is more relating to strangers, newcomers, that would be Muslim. Because that's our experience. Of course, the Hindus and the Sikhs have a little different view of, or a lot different view of revelation of God. But Muslims have a view of the books. That's why I said in the line before, do you believe in the books, guys over there? And they believe in the books. That was my sermon here a year ago, if you remember, about the books. And you can start talking about Muslims about the books, because the Torah is the Torah and the Injil is the gospel. These two words, they know. They don't read them. They believe in them, but they don't read. They think that the ones that we have are not the ones that were mentioned in the Quran. The prophets, Joseph, Abraham, Musa, and on, these are people that Muslims know about. And Hindus and Sikhs would know about them generally because of the Islamic world that's been around them. Prayer, that's again for all strangers, all newcomers. Personal prayer. I don't think anyone in that new room, from that other room, would turn down your offer to pray with them in Jesus' name. Eids. Eids is the Arabic word for festival, religious festival. We've just had Christmas. I don't know if you brought newcomers into your house, but maybe you can covenant for 2025 to do that. My wife and I, we have to do a seminar in our home church on hospitality. So we have covenanted. We're going to try to invite newcomers from our street. And for us, it's easy to invite Afghans and Iranians, so that's maybe not fair, because that's our world. So we have decided we're going to invite Canadian, secular, random people on our street, randomly invite them to our house. We did that 3 weeks ago. Just went to the guy, knocked on his door. I talked to him once or twice before, found out he was not a churchgoer, and said, we want to have you over. And they came, and we want to try to do it again. It's risky, because what's the risk? It's not that they're going to shoot you, but they could say no. That's probably the biggest risk you can take. And now, talking about Jesus, we sang about Jesus, the Son of God. Tell stories of Jesus, tell of your love for Jesus, and tell of the sacrifice of Jesus. So faith matters are something that we can easily, without reservation and apology, talk about with people from the other room. Of course, we got to be careful that we don't just try to shoot them with that Jesus is the Son of God and that Jesus is God and all that big theology. But talk about our love for Jesus, and then we'll move into theological matters. And so, this is my prayer for 2025, for Crossview and for Steinbach churches, for Hanover churches. As Hanover, as the rest of Canada, newcomers are coming to our world. And what will we do with them? Of course, we enjoy our homeroom, and we need to fellowship and be separate in Jesus. But we want to enter that other room, and we want to welcome them into our room, and in that way fulfill the commission of Jesus. As the Father sent me, so I have sent you into the world. This is my prayer for Crossview as you enter 2025.